My name is Frankie Liv. Welcome back to the Atlanta Sports Podcast. I am joined once again by Luke Winston. Today we're going to have a great show. It is Sunday, August 21st, 2016. It is our 8th episode, and we want to thank you for finding us, whether it be on iTunes or Stitcher, or on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com. We're going to start off with the Braves, and Luke, let's get started.
All right, so this week brought us some interesting news from the Braves, and it was really kind of a shocker. They traded Erick Aybar, and in return received infielder Mike Aviles and catcher Cade Shavik. It's a tough name to pronounce, spelled S-C-H or S-C-I-V-I-C-Q-U-E. So yeah, Detroit also received $1.5 million in the deal. Aybar was really just a stopgap until they can get their starting shortstop, Jose Iglesias, back off the disabled list. But Aybar didn't have a good season with Atlanta. No. Yeah, he started out hitting around 210, but then he started turning it around in June. He slashed 302, 393, 396 once he came back off the DL. And then he dipped a bit in July, but put up a 333 average in August, over 54 plate appearances at the time of the trade. So it's a really interesting one. So Frankie, tell us a little bit more about what we got in return for Aybar.
So yeah, the Braves, they got with Mike Aviles. He'd been relied upon pretty heavily by the Tigers in June and July. He hasn't really produced too well in his age 35 campaign. Overall, he owns a 210, 258, and 269 slash. He has 181 plate appearances. The Braves DFA'd him immediately so they could call up Dansby Swanson, which we'll get into later. And then with Cade, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name now. I'll butcher it just like Luke did. He was a 4th-round pick in the 2015 draft. He spent the entire year at the high A level. He slashed 282, 325, 380 with 6 homers. He was recently rated the 20th best prospect in the thin Tiger system by MLB.com, which credited his strong receiving skills, but he may not have enough bat to profile more than a backup in the majors. He is not in the Braves' top 30, but the Braves still essentially bought a lottery ticket here. We added to our farm system. We're not sure how this is going to turn out, but we needed a catcher.
Yeah, so now we'll move to a Braves week in review. They released a few interesting minor league players: Andrew Thurman, Omar Infante, and George Kateris. We'll start out with Thurman. He was acquired in the Evan Gattis trade. He was really the 3rd prospect in that trade. He'd been pitching terribly. He had one of the uglier stat lines in the entire Braves minor league system. And they just had to release him to make room for other younger players that were actually producing. Omar Infante in AAA with Gwinnett. He was not very impressive. He came in hot and started hitting, but he cooled off rather quickly, and his fielding just didn't impress anybody at all. And the 3rd, George Kateris, brought in for some catching depth. With Pierzynski on the DL, if he hit well in AAA, he might have earned himself an opportunity, but he didn't hit well, didn't field well, showed he was kind of washed up, so the Braves released him. So we'll head into Dansby Swanson's first week. Frankie, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, his first day, he was 2 for 4 with the Braves when he first got called up. He had a pretty good day, even though the Braves lost that one pretty big. His 2 hits were pretty good. But, overall, he's doing pretty good. 3 games, 12 at-bats. He's hitting .333, so not bad for the first week.
Yeah, Swanson's also got a double, so he's getting some extra base hits, but that's all he's gotten. He hasn't walked yet, but it's just very interesting to follow Swanson as he develops into a major league player. So we'll start to look back at the trades the Braves have made, and they made a few so far, especially around the deadline. Matt Kemp, Hunter Cervinka, Erick Aybar, 3 different trades. The latter of the 2 bolstered the farm system a little bit, and Kemp helped out the major league team. But Frankie, do you think we are done making moves?
I think so. I know I said a few weeks ago, if we were going to trade anybody, I would have traded Nick Markakis, just because I think he has the most added value. But we found a way to get rid of Aybar, which I think was a good move. But right now, I really don't see us making any more moves.
Yeah, the Braves have passed a few players through waivers: Jeff Francoeur, Nick Markakis, Matt Kemp, and Erick O'Flaherty. Now, I don't expect any of them to be traded, but some of them could. Jim Johnson was another guy the Braves tried to pass through waivers, but he was claimed by a team, so the Braves pulled him back. They didn't want to give him away for free. So it's just interesting to follow. Maybe I'll try to throw him through another type of waivers again.
And I know I'd hate to see Frenchie go. I know most of you guys would too, but the Braves might find something. If they can get the right value on him, I think go ahead. But unless you do, don't waste it.
Yeah, what they could do with Francoeur is what they did with Kelly Johnson. Trade him away, let him go to a contender, play in the playoffs potentially, gain even more experience, and then bring him back the next year to help out more with your major league team and the young players. So we'll head into some Falcons news. They had a nice preseason game versus the Browns. They won 24-13. They made a roster move by waiving Nick Rose and adding Shane Graham. Also signed another player, but we doubt he'll make the team. So Vic Beasley has a shoulder injury, just adding him to the injury report. But there's several different opinions, just depends on which writer you're reading. Some people think that he'll be playing, some don't. Just depends on what you hear. But I don't think it really matters being the preseason. He's looked pretty good so far to me.
Yeah, we still got 2 weeks left in the preseason. You really don't want to make anything worse than what it is already. Just let him rest, I think. So some stats from the game. They're halfway through the preseason now. They're 2-0. They've got a game next week versus the Dolphins. They have to go down to Miami. So we'll see how that goes. This is going to be a big game for most of the players that are still on the bubble. But for some starters stats, Matt Ryan was 6 for 11 with 78 yards. He had no touchdown passes. He is still I guess that's not considered struggling. That's okay. But the week before, he had a tough game. So hopefully he'll get back on track. Rushing, our leader was Cyrus Gray, 18 carries, 76 yards. Devontae Freeman had 4 carries for 42 yards and 1 touchdown. And Tevin Coleman, who's expected to make the team as well, 5 carries, 16 yards, and a 3.2 average. So Atlanta receiving, Mohamed Sanu had 3 receptions for 45 yards. Julio Jones, 1 reception for 20 yards. He's not expected to get a big workload yet. We still got 2 more weeks before we'll see a lot of him. On the tight end side, Austin Hooper, our draft pick from Stanford, 1 reception, 7 yards, so he'll make the team. And I think that's about it for the offense. Defensively, Jonathan Babineau had 4 total tackles. Brooks Reed and Damian Parms, they led the team in tackles. Paul Warlow also added 3. And I think that's about it. Anything to add, Luke?
Well, I'm just going to say there's been a debate on Twitter today on who do you start at the running back position for the Falcons and who do you give more carries. So I voiced my opinion on my Twitter account. You can follow me at Luke Winstill if you want some nice sports information. But I said Devonta Freeman just because he's a clutch player, doesn't have turnover problems, and he's proven. Also, he rushed for over 1,000 yards last year, was elected to the Pro Bowl, and I think that's pretty hard to beat. Even with Tevin Coleman being the guy that they think he will be, I still start Devontae. I give it 60-40 with the carries to Devonta Freeman. I like the idea of Coleman relieving Freeman of A, some pressure, and B, some wear and tear, but I just think Devontae should be the guy that they lean on this year.
I agree with that. And also, speaking of running backs, I'm looking at some stats here for you Georgia fans that might remember Isaiah Crowell. He had 7 carries for 28 yards against the Falcons. I know it's a little bit of a sour name right now, especially since he was the one that got in trouble and then got kicked off the team at Georgia, and now he's back in the NFL. He's actually doing pretty well. He's had a few good years. And then for those of you that are interested in the popular player, RG3 came in. He was 6 for 8 for 96 yards. He also rushed for 36 yards as well.
Yeah, RG3 looks to be back on track for the Browns. He's an interesting story to watch. But we just like to remind you, don't forget about our preview shows coming up. We have a college football show and a Atlanta Falcons NFL preview show.
College football will be next week, and then the Falcons will be the following week. So we may not do as much Braves next week or anything else. It'll be mainly college football next week and mainly Falcons the week after that, and then we'll get back on schedule.
All right, so we'll move on to college football. Not a lot in the Hawks department this week, and we'll just cover some more later on with the Hawks and have a real episode with some good information for you later on. But Frankie, give us a little bit of information on college football.
So we started a blog. You can find that on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com. You can click on the blog tab. We recently published our first post. I wrote one that's taking a look at the impact players for 2016 for all the major colleges, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern, and Georgia State. I picked an offensive impact player from each of those teams. You can find out more about that on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com. And that just about does it. So thank you again for listening to us, the Atlanta Sports Podcast. Remember to follow us on Twitter at ATL Sportscast. And you can find us on Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes. There are links to all directories on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com. Remember, you can contact us with any suggestions or comments or anything you want to just talk to us about. We'll be there and we'll answer to you as soon as we can. You can find that on our website as well or at the show at atlantasportspodcast.com. We'll see you next week with another show.